they still?
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
I said, hey, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. I said, hey, welcome to the Man Cave Happy Hour. We're gonna drink a fine whiskey and smoke a really fine cigar.
All right, it is time for Happy Hour. It is the Man Cave Happy Hour. Whiskey, cigar, spirits, the stories that go along with it. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
I am the one and only Matt Fox. Hey, how are you guys?
I'm good. Tuesday.
Hey, guess what I got? Guess what I got, Jamie?
What do you got, Matthew?
I got a bottle of Joe Louis bourbon in my hands.
And it's full. It's not like I have a brand new
supplies have been set. Hi, everybody. This is Michael again.
This is Will. I'd hold mine up, but I drank it.
Nice. Good on you, buddy.
Oh, there you are. And Charles is with us as well. Author of Detroit, City of Champions. And cheers, gentlemen. It's Tuesday.
Although it's not necessarily a happy hour Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
It's difficult. It's a difficult Tuesday tasting.
Yeah. So
we posted something on Facebook today, which is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. What would Joe do?
Fair play.
Joe Louis was more than just a boxer to his people. He was a symbol of pride, strength, and dignity in the face of the oppression they suffered in the land of the free. Martin Luther King later described what Louis meant to them when he wrote about the execution of a young black prisoner in a southern prison. As the poison gas pellets were dropped in the jet chamber and the gas rolled upwards, his last words were, "Save me, Joe Louis. Save me, Joe Louis. Save me, Joe Louis." And that's kind of the jumping off point for really a troubling week. And for this country, pandemic plus credible strife in the streets. And, it's the question, what would Joe do? There's a lot of lessons. And I've been reading a bunch of things. And so you guys, I wanted to, if I may introduce our guest.
Yes, please.
Will Wright. So Will, hello, Will.
Hey. What's up, buddy?
Will and I have known each other for a long time. When we were kids, we worked together at CNN. But Will
used to be bald then.
Yeah, right. And just celebrated the 40th anniversary, by the way, yesterday.
Happy anniversary, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. But anyway, Will is here for a couple of reasons. One is that not only is he a friend, but Will professionally spent 35, 40 years of his career in news. We talk about CNN, but many other how many?
50.
Oh,
I know. I'm a lot younger. I'm a lot older than I look. I look really young, but I'm the youngest 70-year-old you know.
I wouldn't put you past 55, Will. I really wouldn't.
I'll take that as a compliment any day.
Why don't you tell everybody what you kind of have an interesting journey in journalism that there's a reason why you're on this. Two reasons, really. Well, there's more.
Yeah, William. William, thanks for. I'm sorry, I'm just stepping all over you there. I was just saying, welcome for being in the Man Cave. Super excited to have you with us. But yeah, William, tell us about your childhood.
Well, the fun is I'm in my man cave here in Eastern Long Island, the little town of Fort Salonga. I just recently retired from NBC News. I was with NBC a total of 13 years, and I've been in the news business for 50 years during that period of time. And I started right when I got out of high school as a news professional. And what motivated me was in the 60s, 1968 to be exact. I had been involved in putting together a local community newspaper. And you remember 68 was a very difficult time in terms of civil rights and turmoil. We, and I say we, which includes me, were people who are on the streets, like people on the streets today, demonstrating against the war in Vietnam. Not that we were anti-war per se, but we did not like the involvement that our country did in that country and felt that we could have gone about it a lot different in terms of building a nation as opposed to tearing a nation down. Here we are now, pretty much fighting the same kind of struggle, which is compounded by the fact that we here in this day and time I never thought in my 70 years of existence that I would be in a world where there would be a pandemic, that there still would be so much racial strife, and that we would be in a political situation that seemed to exacerbate the pandemic and the racial strife. And so when I got a call from Michael, and Michael said he wanted to talk about what would Joe Louis do, I thought it would be exciting because Joe Louis was a very interesting character in terms of his almost like an accidental civil rights leader. Mm-hmm. You know, he was a great sportsman and he wanted to be involved in sport, but the times of his life drew him into this pitched battle where he was representative of not only civil rights but American might and American will, and in doing that, you know, his whole theme was he wasn't interested in money. He even said, you know, I'm not interested in money, but it quiets my nerves, and it kind of like is in sync with what's happening now with these people out on the street. During the pandemic, they weren't working. It's been 3 months. A lot of people have not gotten an income. Their prospects are weakened by the fact that their businesses have been closed, that the economic prospects, if you're a student, are right now very nebulous. And so they're out on the street saying, help me. What can I do? You know, it's not that they want to be rich. They want to survive. They want to live, and they want to be happy. They want hope for the future. And so the flip side of that is, you know, we have COVID-19. We have people who have been shut in, looking for hopes for the future, and it almost seems as though it's a redo of the '60s in terms of the national strife that we feel, the fear that we're feeling, the hopelessness that we're feeling, which has driven people out on the street. I was talking to my wife. Right now in New York, there are tens of thousands of people in the street, and we looked at each other and said, what else is there? What else is there for them to do? You know, they're not going to sit at home under the circumstances because they're in pain. And so you have athletes who are really stepping up and making us feel. If I talk too much, let me know because I get wound up. No,
please. We're loving it, William.
We have athletes who really,
Jamie likes that because he can drink more.
we have athletes who really are understanding this. Similar in the spirit of Joe Louis. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar a couple of days ago wrote this excellent explanation in the New York Times in terms of how he sees it. And he says what we're seeing are people who are pushed to the edge. And they're pushed to the edge not only of the fact that Black men and women are dying at the hands of police, but also we have this great economic disparity. We've gone through two of these bailout bills, and there's still people who have not seen any help from that. And they're frustrated. And so they're out on the street. Magic Johnson, on CNN, he did two interviews on CNN in the past week, and he talked about how he has to still have conversations with his son about the talk, and that is so heartbreaking because my talk came when I was 5 years old, and I was traveling through the South with my grandmother, and it was she was really concerned about the fact that you know young boys at that time in the South were vulnerable, and she had to have that talk with me, and I'm 5. I'm looking at her like, you know, what are you talking about? So it became it's something that even 65 years ago when I was a babe, that talk is still had by Black families to their young Black men. And so that's the type of frustration that we're feeling, and things haven't changed. But then you have inspirational figures, you know, and it's inspirational figures in sports. Joe Louis being among them, you know, where he was, as I mentioned, an accidental civil rights leader, with his battle to get recognition for African American athletes. But he was able to do it just like boxing is an individual sport. He was able to individually change the calculus in terms of how young Black men were viewed in the boxing world, so that they had a sense of self-determination and strength that were afforded by his good graces and his ability to transform mind through his skills.
Well, we just had up a picture. There's an article that I found earlier today about Isaac Woodard, the Isaac Woodard story. He was the Army vet who was beaten, boarded a bus and was beaten and left blind. Mm-hmm. And this picture is, I don't know if you were talking, but is of Joe Louis with him, really showing his support and helping him walk up the stairs. But this is a really terrible story, and that was, and I wasn't really plugged into that, and I encourage anyone to go Google Isaac Woodard. There was some amazing things. Orson Welles did a whole series of radio shows, and at the time, this was like the ultimate outrage cause, and there were. But even at that point, Joe Louis was there to be in solidarity and show support in a non-violent and non-confrontational way.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty amazing. So I guess the question really that I have for you, Will, is, in reading what we've, and by the way, I should point out that Will has a connection to this, and that we worked together on developing the Joe Louis brand story and the authenticity and addressing the diversity issue. So he and I have both had some time to research and study and learn a bit. And it really was that Joe rose above the fray in many ways, and he wielded great power and influence in positive ways. I don't know, Will, if you want to speak to that.
Well, that's right. It's at the time I came along and became sensitive to the civil rights movement in the 60s. Was my generation of civil rights advocacy. Joe Louis at the time wasn't considered a firebrand, wasn't considered a major force in the civil rights or an advocate of African American advancement, and it's for all of the right reasons. It's because at the time he didn't buy into the far left nationalist movement. And I believe that at that time, and I even understand it even more now, that what he did in the 30s and 40s gave him, I think, license to choose his way of dealing with civil rights. And it's not a situation where he rests on his laurels. He can say the modern day African American athletes, the elite athletes of the 60s, were able to become elite athletes admired in a singular league, be it football, be it baseball, or even in the ring, in a singular league because of what he did to unify ideas that an African American can be a leader and can advance a sport for all people. And so he didn't have to be a protege of Malcolm X. He didn't have to walk the street with Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers. And he didn't have to, have White House visits to Lyndon Johnson or Kennedy, because his effect was already felt, and it was already part of the elevation of African American sportsmen. It was already done. So his brand of African American advocacy had always been subtle. He never said, "I'm going to go into boxing so that I can lead Black people to the promised land." He went into boxing because he enjoyed it. He said, "I'm good at this. I love this." Oh, and by the way, if you think that you can hitch your wagon and think that if I beat Max Schmeling or for Schmeling, or if I show Hitler what for, or if I can become the heavyweight champion of the world 23, 24 years after the last African-American had been given that opportunity, then that's all great. But understand that I'm doing this because I love boxing. But if all of the rest of this stuff can happen, I'm down for that too.
He was changing, Joe Louis, he was changing, everyone's minds with every single blow to Max Schmeling. Everyone took that as a win every single time. In the first 2 minutes, 4 seconds of the second fight, every blow was a win.
For the US, and for the community. Every blow he took in the first one, all the way up to the 12th round, when he lost, was a realization that how much we put on this man. And he felt it himself. He says, everyone has a plan until they get beaten. His plan was, he was just going to maybe coast. And it shows hard work. It's all of us. I think that, the lesson there was it's not going to be easy. Nothing's going to be easy. The people on the street today have to realize that nothing's going to be easy. They were out on the street yesterday in Washington, across the street from the White House, doing a peaceful demonstration. And it wasn't easy when they got gassed and pushed out of that park. Colin Kaepernick, 4 years ago, took a knee to demonstrate that, it's a quiet demonstration. He took a knee basically because the NFL players who had served in the military felt it was disrespectful to do anything during the national anthem, but to take a knee. He took a knee on the advice of his fellow NFL players who felt here's a respectful way of doing this, and he was drummed out of the business. Another accidental civil rights leader. I don't think Colin Kaepernick himself, felt that he needed to give up his career to do this. But in retrospect, how does he look now? And what he says to me is, be damned what you damned if you do, damned if you don't. If Colin Kaepernick had, stood up and rallied the people in the stadium to riot, he would have been criticized, but he took this very subtle a way of demonstrating police brutality, and he was criticized. So what do you do? And I think Joe Louis came to the realization that, it's in the 30s and the 40s, he did what he could, what was comfortable for him. And then when the 60s rolled around, when it was really different in terms of advocacy, he says, well, I can't do that, but I did what I did, and I'll continue to do what I can do. And if you want to hold me up as an icon in a historical perspective, that's something I'll continue to reinforce.
As our country, it's been in an internal struggle for years and years. It really has, whether it be consciously, unconsciously, medically. We're going through this internal struggle, and we need folks to kind of step up at like Joe Louis did. We all need some inspiration. If you can't find it now, look to our history and see what inspired us to make a change. And that's what I think Joe Louis is. He didn't know he was doing it at that time, but we look back and he's a man before anything else, and you have to respect that. There's actually a documentary that I was learning about by James Baldwin that was just released in 2016, and it's a documentary that was just released, and it's very powerful. It's from a manuscript that was not finished completely, and it was from 1979 when James Baldwin wrote this manuscript, and a director did this documentary based on that manuscript, and it's really supposed to be very, very powerful. It was released in February 2017. So that is something that I'm looking forward to watching and learning a little bit more about James Baldwin, because it was all about the civil rights and how everything is connected going back from then until now. It's just an incredible story from what I understand.
It is. It is true. The connection that history has on events is really illuminating. If you look at some of the similarities to what's happening today, to what happened in the 60s, to what happened in the 40s, how was it? The anniversary of Black Wall Street, the destruction of Black Wall Street was last week. And that, that was a moment in history where the folks who were concerned that that would have been lost in history, and the graves of the African Americans who died there would never be found. That became a symbol, something to look back at during these times. When the protesters in Wisconsin and Michigan who wanted to open up the United States, not the United States, but wanted to open up their state amid the COVID-19 shutdown, showed up with firearms and went into the Capitol with those firearms. There were lots of conversations about what if they were Black demonstrators and they walked into the state capitol with firearms, and it was a polemic discussion. And I love people who respond in social media, who would like to engage. And the engagement I got was there would be a few people who would show one or two photos of Black Panthers in Los Angeles who did that at LA City Hall back in the 60s. But what they didn't realize is that the law was passed immediately following that to make sure that there were no guns allowed in the City Hall. But there was no laws passed in Wisconsin and Michigan as a result of that. So there's still that double standard which still exists. And so there's a little off the mark in terms of Joe Louis, but it goes to show you that the times are pretty much the same. I saw a piece that was done with Nick Cannon talking about how I Can't Breathe, and he goes through the whole historical context of why is it that Black people can't protest and be considered part of America? If they protest in any way, it gets knocked down or it gets criticized, or the worst elements come out of it. The biggest concern among Black people now, especially those who would like to see something positive come out of the demonstrations of the past 6 days, is that there's this criminal element that breaks in stores and goes crazy. Those are people who are on a different agenda. Their agenda is they've been shut in the house 3 months. They don't have a job. They didn't get money from the federal government to kind of help them out. They're desperate. This is desperate people taking advantage of a situation. That happens, but that doesn't define the fact that there's still a problem when it comes to policing in the United States when it comes to people of color.
I love the protests and watching it. Some of it's unsettling, but it's just I love that people are out there doing what they're doing, and the demographics of the crowd are extraordinarily mixed demographics, which is great. It's the looting. It just kind of it draws all the winds out of the sails of the message that the people that are putting up a good message throughout the day, and then it gets really soured. So you guys said you were at CNN, right? So did you see that?
The early days.
Did you see that standoff 2 nights ago? And they were in the lobby, but not the main lobby, but like a side lobby where the restaurants and hotels were.
Yeah, CNN Center.
And the police were inside the lobby there, and people were throwing things through the window. Man, that's just that's
just CNN becomes a symbol.
Yeah.
Right? Because it represents kind of the mainstream media, and quite frankly, they know they're going to get attention. You can't not get, global headlines from breaking through the front of CNN. But, I think what's important, whether or not, there's a lot of discussion about who's really behind the violence, and are these, groups that are really just trying to, instigate and create more.
The bear, yes.
And I think that there's probably some truth to that. What I find really incredible is there are a few people who have, like the mayor of Atlanta, you know, really taking decisive action, but being very personal when she said, you know, don't lecture me on compassion and, concern. I mean, I'm a mother of a black child. Every day I worry about whether he's going to, that really puts things in perspective. And, and the fact is that there are enough of these governors that are recognizing that, quite frankly, they'd like to be in the protest. Not necessarily be looting and going after the, attacking police, but, it's really, I think that's kind of what this is. I don't think there's anybody that can really say that there's no cause for protest.
Quite a few politicians, especially the ones in Washington, were at some of the demonstrations, walking alongside of the demonstrators, and one or two of them were victims of tear gas and talked about how they were caught up in the middle when the police decided that they wanted to make a move, that suddenly they were trapped. Also, the unsung heroes are members of the press. We have a chief executive who brands the press the enemy of the people, but I believe that the work that they are doing are really heroic in terms of showing us what's really going on the ground, on the ground, with warts and all. They're showing the demonstrations that are peaceful, then they're showing the looters and the rioters and the people who are absolutely crazy. And then they're looking at both sides. Who might be the cause of it? Who are the splinter groups that are breaking off? They're showing that there was an incident, I believe it was in Kentucky, where a policeman was had broken off from his team and was all by himself, and a group of people gathered around him to protect him, to make sure that he wasn't harassed or hurt. Mennonites showed up and supported Black Lives Matter. It's I think this is a universal movement that says more than just the loss of the life of Mr. Floyd. It is pretty much people who are fed up with what's going on in America and really are looking for a change, and really got hurt in this COVID-19 pandemic, which isn't really being addressed in all of the ways that it should be. And in itself, there's a lot of this is a confluence of major problems. One of the management skills, when I had to, oddly enough, you go in the news, you graduate from J school, and no one basically tells you that, journalism is a business, and you have to go back to school and train a little bit. And one of the things I learned in management is when people complain, it's a call for service. They're complaining because there's a grievance that's within sight, that is within reach. But no one is helping them get there. What Joe Biden showed up this morning, and he listed a couple of things that could be done like tomorrow that can satisfy some of the grievances.
Yeah.
If American politicians had a will to do it.
So, William, I teach high school and I teach journalism, and so I'm coaching young kids to get out there and tell stories. We work closely with the PBS NewsHour, and we work with mentors out of Washington, and my kids create stories that get sent to the PBS website. It's an amazing opportunity for them, but trying to show them in the things that they see in our local media and in the national media, I don't feel are always great. So being a person with 40, 50 years experience in the media, how do you feel the press is handling things with the way they're sharing this story? Do you think they're doing a good job? Do you think they're exacerbating things?
I think they're doing a good job. I did a little post which basically praised Ali Velshi. I think it was Sunday morning is when I put it up, what he had gone through in terms of he was with the marchers, walking and talking the whole night before. Then he went through the worst that Wisconsin had to throw at him. in terms of the unrest there. And he was up the next morning anchoring his show. I think that you see a lot of tireless efforts. I thought CNN's coverage of what happened yesterday when the president came out and at the Rose Garden, and then they did a split screen. And suddenly they showed all of these people being pushed out of the way, and the president talking about his resolve to dominate the crowds. And I thought it was pretty interesting that they did it, because the split screen, nothing allows you as the viewer to come to your own conclusion than actually showing the events as they're happening, if you could show that perspective. And that split screen was a tremendous perspective in terms of the president on one hand talking about domination, and but he was going to support peaceful demos. And then the split screen showing the park and the federal police, tear gassing and rubber bulleting this group, and then the photo op, and all of this was done basically almost real time with the ability of the viewer to make their own decision. And I think that's what's the important thing that's happening now. 24-hour news, I think, and Twitter are some of the things that really turn the tide in terms of polarization.
Yes.
People have gravitated to what they think the news should be, and they're curating their own news.
Right.
And in curating their own news, they tend to stay in one place and get one viewpoint. And I think that where the news needs to be now, and unfortunately it's going to be us as viewers and consumers of news to make this change, where if you are an MSNBC viewer, you're going to like what MSNBC puts on the air. If you're a Fox viewer, Fox is the number one cable news. And Fox doesn't have the majority of the news viewers. People on the right tend to be more focused and want to basically hear what they have, and they have Fox. People on the left or liberal or not as or tend to not be as committed to a TV or cable news. So I think that the formula that will win in the future is going to be the people who can satisfy the greatest amount and somehow build a bridge and to show all of the points of view and let the viewers decide. It's not just doing a right-wing point of view that says we report, you decide, but decidedly right-wing, or a left-leaning news and saying we're liberal, but we're showing you what it is and how it is. It's somewhere in the middle, and it is to get people to embrace it so that the polarization dissolves.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
The part that I don't appreciate is when it's just an anchor in the studio and then a reporter on the street, and then the two of them, the anchor is like throwing questions at the reporter, and then the both of them are just sort of speculating. And they're then they're just, well, this could be happening, and this could be the reason, this might be this, and it's just all this speculation, and it's not news, and it's not a story. It's when they bring the people in and you hear people's voices and you hear their pleas or their emotions, and their wants and their desires. And that's the storytelling. It's telling those people's stories. It's just not a reporter and an anchor speculating. And that part of it makes me nuts. And it's across each one of those news channels that they do that. It's disheartening. And you got your video guys out there capturing just some amazing and putting themselves in harm's way to get this, to document this story. I think some of the voices are getting ignored. And it's just a speculation, which makes me nuts. And that's what I tell my kids all the time is it's the stories that matter. It's people that matter. And that's what Charles did and does, he tells those stories. He's dived into history and into Detroit's history and sports history, and he's telling these amazing stories and these people that did amazing things. Joe Louis being one of them. And I had asked Charles earlier about Joe and his activism, and I said, "Was Joe an activist?" And Charles, your response surprised me. So, was Joe Louis an activist? How was he received in his time?
Well, no, I agree. With Williams' appraisal of the situation. I thought his summary of Joe Louis's, was perfect. I mean, I really have nothing to add with regards to Joe's. He was sort of. There's people in this world, like throughout history, that I call children of destiny, and it's like people that are just born like in a certain situation, and they're like the world events touch, they're the perfect person at that exact perfect time. The swirling world events around them, are catered exactly to what they bring to the table. And the impacts that they have are thus like profound. And there's almost like nothing they can do about it because they're swept along. I mean, it doesn't negate the energy or effort they put into it, but that they're just like swept along. And Joe Louis, I agree with William. It was, really that same situation where, really this is a guy that's, he's coming up. I mean, just as poor as a person can possibly be. Coming up in an era of boxing in sports history that is incredibly segregated. I mean, has no chance. I mean, if you were to talk about Joe before his rise, he had absolutely no chance. And so the fact that he was able to do what he did, like there were so many things that were exterior forces that, that he was. That he was just caught up with that allowed him to get the chance, and that he was he had the fist to actually take advantage of it, and everything just so one of the things like that I was just reading about Joe Louis through all the books and everything is just that he was that first like universal black hero that, even before his biggest fight, like his first big fight against Primo Carnera, like the NAACP didn't even know if they could get behind him because they didn't want to put all their eggs in this one basket when they didn't know if he'd won a bunch of fights, but he never won anything like huge. He never beat like a former heavyweight champion or anything. And so when he beat Primo Carnera, it was all of a sudden like, here he is, this is our champion. And so it was really, it was like, it was just, full on Joe Louis mania. And so, and then, that really did, even Jackie Robinson said, years later that, it was Joe Louis that had, you really opened that first door for him to follow because, by the time Jackie Robinson made his impact, it was, when he broke, when he got into baseball, Joe Louis had already been the heavyweight champion. He'd already been, Joe Louis created this, one of the many paradoxes he created was, how can baseball be the American sport, the American game, when boxing, it's segregated still, when boxing is like the most savage sport there is, but Joe Louis, a black man's been the heavyweight champion for a decade. So it's also the most, boxing is like the most progressive, like he created that paradox, like, it just, to open to force that conversation towards all these, towards other doors being open. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, that I think that was really Joe's, and it was like, he was the perfect person at that time too, because, in the early 1900s, when Jack Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion, he scandalized the press. I mean, it was, getting his teeth capped in gold and driving around in flashy cars. And, like they say, there's no, there's a debate about whether he should have done these things and, be himself or whatever. But, everybody's got, there's different, conversations about that, but there's no debate about the impacts of him having done so, which was to create an atmosphere, which was like, no black man will ever do this to us again. Like it's just not going to happen. So when Joe came along being this like, humble and like sort of a God-fearing man, and they, every single photo that they posed him in his personal life was like, he's with his mom and he's like a good Christian man. He was able to, create that, that just like, like that, just like a more like a palatable figure rather than, sort of scandalized it. So he was like the perfect person as well as his abilities and everything. So, I mean, I think, and I call Joe Louis, I call Joe Louis, I mean, I look at him as a social unifier. I think that was, I've never looked at Joe Louis as an activist, like, taking to the streets and that kind of thing, like, like an Ali type figure, where, like outspoken and this and that. And that's what I was telling you, Jamie, was, not necessarily like an activist in that regard, but the impacts of him were just profound because, against Schmeling, he created that paradox, which was, who are you going to root for? A black man, an American, you know what I mean? Or are you going to root for a white Nazi? You know what I mean? Like he forced people to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And in that regard, you know what I mean? Like when people did root for Joe and he won and they loved him, it created that unifying, that factor where race didn't matter. Color didn't matter. This was, they loved him. They loved him. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that to me is the message that needs that. I think that is the conversation, like kind of going forward is this idea of is like, what's it going to like this, like unity, not like love, man. I know I hate to be like almost sentimental, but like, and I think that's one of the things that like about sports that I like. And I actually wrote about this in the book, in the Joe Louis section of my second book, which is I say like, inside the stadium. Okay. Like for instance, we're talking about the Detroit Tigers, right? We go into the Comerica Park or Tiger Stadium, whatever it is like this. And we are all freaking family, man. We're all like, there's no race. There's no politics. There's no anything. We're united because of the Tigers, man. They are our team. Black people, white people. They're, every creed and color is on the field. Every creed and color is in the crowd. Everybody, it's a love fest or a hate fest for the other team. We're united for our city. We're united for a thing. So the question, I actually say this in my book. So the question is this. I've got a solution to it all. I got a solution right now. Right? Let's build a stadium the size of a city. We can incorporate the entire city around it, just the wall of that ballpark. And we can all live in it. We can all live in the ballpark. Mm-hmm. We can all be on the city. We can root for our cities. We can root for each other and all this. That's why I say, like, why is it that those bonds inside the ballpark, why is it that they exist in the ballpark, but the second we get outside, it just turns into divisiveness and politics the second you get outdoors. And that's one of the things that gets that, that kind of gets me. And it really all that wall around the ballpark, that's not, it's ridiculous to build a ballpark the size of a city, but that's what I'm saying, that's what's preventing us, that fictional wall, that one thing, that one concept, that's all that's like basically needed is like, it's just a sense of like, we're all in this world together, man. We're all in it, and it's like, let's root for each other. Let's root for the whole, let's root for our cities. Let's root for our regions. We can be competitive against, it's just the one thing that I've taken from history in my entire life, and history is my obsession, not just sports, but history is my obsession. And it's this one thing. If you were to tattoo this on this is probably going to go on my tombstone. Right, because this is my one thing that I believe in, to the very core of my being, is that together human beings can do anything, literally anything. We could set our sights on time travel, and if we all work together, we'd probably achieve it. We can do anything together, and but separate, we can't do. We're helpless. Like we're like. We can build the pyramids of Egypt together, but then separate and individual people, we can't even build a sandbox. So that's what I'm saying. That to me, like I say, that to me should be our goal. That should be our goal. And just as my last little point on that concept is the last point. If that's our goal, then it makes it easier to start beginning to say, well, if that's our goal, how do we get there? And that's, I think, a question that needs to be asked is, what is the goal? Like, it's not just like vague, like, we need to try to do these things or whatever. What's like, if our goal is to unity, what that means is it forces us to start compromising on everything, politics, everything. Like, okay, I see, like, let's talk. what's the, like, what can we do? Like start maybe doing projects. Like, let's build this thing. Okay, what's it going to take to do it? You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm saying is like that's the way my mind works is like project oriented. Is project oriented, and that's what I'm saying. Like for me, it's like what, like I say, what is it going to take? What is it going to take? So that's the thing that sticks out to me. So I guess that's a little bit, this is kind of a passion time, time to be alive. So it's, Jamie, I think that's about the shortest I can get on that one.
I think Charles, you're on something special.
I'm sorry, William, I can't hear you. This song is in my ear.
That song just kind of popped up on us. I'm not sure where that came from.
Mike's going a little nuts over there.
It came from me. That saved me, Joe Louis. I was trying to give a little.
Oh, you're trying to give us some background.
Okay.
You weren't trying to play
for a music bed. All right.
He was trying to play you off.
That was it. It was like the Oscars. Charles,
it was like the Jaws, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I very elegant approach to how problems can be solved. And yeah, we can't build a stadium, but we can build the tent poles.
I love that
That's
imagery.
what I'm saying. To me, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not even, but that's what I'm saying is like, it's not about the actual brick wall. You know what I mean? Like it's all that's stopping us is it's just the will to see it, to say, you know what I mean? We don't need a wall. We just, I mean, it's like, we just need to recognize that we're all people. Right. And it's like, and like that hate, anger, corrosiveness, like all this, like it's an infection. And like, that should be the enemy. There's a famous old Japanese general, I believe his name, it was Tokugawa Ieyasu. Don't ask me to say that more than a couple times, but he used to say, make anger your enemy. Make anger your enemy. And he was one of the greatest military leaders there. He was like, make anger your enemy. And like you say, like, unity is a strength, anger your enemy, and all these type of things. I think these, like, they may sound kind of like abstract things, like in those concepts, but like I say, like, this is what those are the kind of things that I believe. And I just, like I say, the main thing is people working together, and it starts with each person doing it. It's not about talk. Like I'm telling you guys, but I'm not telling you to do it or whatever. I'm telling you that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm gonna do. Is I want to, like, I'm going to listen to, like that. I'm trying to say, like, actions are everything, and everybody's accountable for their own behavior.
That's what I took from. That's what I took from what you were telling me about Joe, is that he wasn't really outspoken, and he wasn't an activist, but his actions stood as an example.
Sure.
And it was just, so he wasn't necessarily an outspoken activist, but his actions, stood and he became this icon, for lack of a better word.
I've never met Joe Louis, and one thing that I've learned from him is that emotional intelligence. Instead of acting out right away based on your emotion, take a step back and think about what you're doing, what you're going to say, and then come to the table with, your vision and then act on that and bring people into your fellowship and, help them to understand your position, but don't get so emotional that it's going to cause them to overreact as well. That is just one thing that I can almost envision sitting down and having that conversation with him. He's like, all right, take a step back and think about this for a second. That's kind of where I'm coming from, going forward. That's what I take away from Joe Louis, is just sitting back, thinking about my emotions, and then coming. Yeah,
I've always viewed Joe as like just one of the most like everything you read about him he was just like a genuine human being. I mean, I think that's a tougher thing to quantify with facts and figures and boxing numbers, like all that stuff. But everything that I've read about him was that he was just a genuine human being. And like, that's why I asked, his Jojo, the last time we talked was like, what was he like? Because like everything I've read about him was like, he just seemed like the kind of guy that was just, it wasn't like some faker that was just putting on an image for the press. I mean, he was a genuinely good and decent person. And I think
JoJo's
that's
answers
another lesson.
I love JoJo answers to that question. JoJo was like, it was Dad.
Yeah,
I know. That's right. But he,
Well,
but
I think the beautiful things about the concepts that you had talked about, Charles, is that the 10 poles that I saw: faith, pride, leadership, and inclusion.
Mhm.
And if that could be worked into every aspect of a solution to some of the problems we see now, then we will have achieved that stadium. That stadium.
Well, I'm saying, but the thing about it is I think that it's, that old American ideal. It's the old, it's some of one of the most foundational American ideals, which is like to each person unto like their own like themselves, like every person. Like, I know it's like, well, how do you implement that into a plan where everybody has to be accountable for their own sort of behavior? Well, you just do that.
Yeah.
Everybody's accountable for their own behavior. Like, I mean, it's like, and that it's good for good or ill, everyone, every single person. And that's just like, I mean, hey, that person's a good person. Okay, great. Like, and it's just like, I don't know. I've seen in throughout history, it's crazy. I just wish that every single empire, every single thing that's ever been done, it usually starts off, everything that's been great ever, anything that's ever been great, like something built, like some army that becomes invincible, like anything that's ever been like great, it always starts off with a bunch of people that are all unified, and they like all are work for whatever reason. Maybe they don't even like each other, but they still work together, for usually maybe for common defense, like World War II, for instance, common defense. And we just like, you just roll, this thing just rolls over, and it, rolls over everybody, or, it just becomes like unbeatable or incredible. And then a second, it's usually like once it's built, once it's like, gotten to be amazing, then all of a sudden everybody just starts squabbling over the pieces, and it just all falls apart. Like that's history. Like that's the repetitive cycle of history, is that it's like, so you see these like cycles where everybody works together, does something incredible, and then they all start squabbling over the pieces, and it just falls apart every time. And I just like, that's the sadness for me, is looking at, sort of America as we are today. And it's like, I just like, it's just like, I just, I love this country, man. And I just want to see everybody like, I don't know. I want everybody to like work together, man. Like, and it might just be like a wishful thinker or whatever, but it's just history. It's like fact. I mean, people work together, we can do some awesome stuff. If we don't, it's just going to be a freaking shit show. I mean, it's like, so it's, so I mean, it's really it's up to each person. Ultimately, it's up to each person. You're not going to like legislate. I don't think everybody's going to I don't think we're going to like legislate our way out of anything. It's going to be, I think if, it's going to either improve or it's going to get worse. And it's ultimately going to be up to the people that on the ground, the people, the day-to-day people, the interactions. It's just,
Right. So, as the restrictions, they're starting to loosen up quite a bit. Whitmer tore the Band-Aid off yesterday, as Jamie put it. As the restrictions start to lighten up, Michael, I'm curious to know, are you guys starting to plan out events in certain cities and for releases of Joe Louis at all, or
any Golden Glove news?
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're not planning events as much as we are planning next markets, and
Okay.
in fact looking at timetables. And so things, even in Michigan, the fact that restaurants and bars are going to do some limited reopenings, and we know from experience in other markets that takeout beverages and bars and patio service is really the first to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really looking at that and trying to map that to certain markets. The events part of it is a challenge. We had a meeting the other day with a group that is putting together. They are promoting a 2-year professional boxing challenge called Making of a Champion, and they are their first, and it's going to be on CBS. But they're having to do the first events, the July and the September events, planned as virtual events with no audiences. So they were actually talking about, what if we did some events that were more like virtual events, like set up a boxing ring, on a beach where people are,
we're outside. Come on, bring it.
Yeah. So, so there's kind of those kind of creative conversations happening. I don't see, we don't know. None of the amateur boxing tournaments that were part of this marketing plan are coming back this year.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, forward thinking, when things start to roll out, how many more, do you have any update as to how many stores Joe Louis is in right now?
What? The last update I had was from last week. I haven't seen one yet.
Let's go to the tote board.
Yeah, right.
It was over 600 stores.
That's great.
And so sales have continued to go extremely well. The 60-day sales report was basically achieved greater volume than we anticipated in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. So, when everything was going to be open and everything was going to be happening.
Yeah.
So, we're not taking our eyes off of Launch Market Michigan too soon because we think there's a lot of more opportunity, and it's been, really a great embrace of the legacy and the product.
Pardon the expression, you have a lot of boots on the ground, but you got guys here in Michigan that are just they're having an amazing experience with the stores here in Michigan. Where is your inevitable next launch going to be at? 'Cause I think you had mentioned it. I think Vegas was.
So the next market, it's New England, which is starts in New Hampshire and then expands.
So not too far from Will.
It's Florida. Yeah, exactly. It's Florida. Several markets in Florida. In fact, I was just in Tampa this past weekend, handing a bottle of Joe Louis bourbon to the beverage director at the Don Cesar Hotel.
Nice. Did you fly or drive?
I drove.
Yeah, good man.
Wow.
And then we're looking at other markets that we were raring to go. Nevada. Mm-hmm. So that's still kind of on hold because it's unclear what's opening and what's happening there. That was supposed to be April, Nevada, and then Tulsa, Oklahoma, was going to be by May for the Nationals. But we still are. We have a meeting on Friday with the distributor there to still look at Oklahoma. So I would say that over the next 2 to 3 weeks, as we're getting a better handle on what's opening when and what's possible, we're going to solidify that. But definitely we had a really great plan before this all happened.
Yeah. Well, hopefully peace and justice can spread as quickly as Joe Louis has in Michigan. Because we need a little bit of that right now. And William, thanks for the insights and the news stories. I appreciate you being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I really appreciate being here.
It's
50 years in the media industry. That is something to behold.
That's a true.
I clap. That is truly amazing.
I tell people if my career was a child, I'd be a grandfather.
Exactly.
Do appreciate your insight. Really do. Truly.
Thank you.
And Charles, we didn't get a chance to talk about your new backdrop.
Yeah.
Charles,
the title of your book, Charles. You didn't tell us the title of your book.
The book's title is called Detroit City of Champions. Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's I got 3 books. It's called the Detroit City of Champions trilogy. Okay. So it's that's like my main thing that I have. But I've got so many other projects. It's crazy. Like I actually wrote a screenplay for a movie based on it all. The website's DetroitCityOfChampions.com. And then I do a lot of like baseball stuff, but I think we all know on this channel, William, that if we start talking about, if they ask me about baseball on this right now, it's going to start getting real crazy.
No stop at Charles when it comes to baseball, man.
Save that segment for another time. Cause I'm telling you, we start talking about baseball. It's especially right now, my God, man, like it's like,
and if I didn't know anything about you, Charles, I'd have to say I think you were a magnet collector. I'm just going out on.
No, I'm actually at a mall right now. I was doing some work. I'm doing some work helping this store.
I thought you had some collection of like.
No. I know. You think, look at this. Yeah, look at this magnet wall.
Right on.
Oh my God, that's great. I thought you were in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Oh, so
it's got a little more color than my usual backdrop. My usual backdrop's a window. So. I'm trying to help open this store up a little bit, like getting some stuff cleaned up or whatever. And
can I at the risk of going too long, can I do a little plug for Will and I?
Absolutely,
yeah.
One of the reasons that Will and I got reconnected was Joe Louis Bourbon and the work we did on that. And so since then, we've launched an initiative called In the Spirit of Diversity, Inclusiveness, and Authenticity to work with brands, spirits brands. And some of the other members of the team, stop, are people that you might recognize we've had on some shows. Samara, who's the founder of the Black Bourbon Society, JoJo, Sean Gresh, who's a candidate for mayor of Baltimore, and Ariel Burnett, who's been involved in the social creative of the Joe Louis Bourbon brand.
Nice.
But we've all kind of come together to bring different perspectives and experience to help brands evolve their stories authentically and to resonate. Now, we didn't necessarily realize that we would be talking about to this extent of racial divide and diversity, but it's been good to be back in the saddle with Mr. Will J. Wright.
Love it.
Is there a panel, or are you guys putting a panel together so folks can ask you questions?
So what we've been a little bit distracted by the COVID shutdowns, but we've got a couple of video episodes that we have that are on. They're not really publicly promoted; it's more industry. But we've done some conversations about what brands need to know, and I may share this with you in future episodes so we can.
Yeah, please.
But we're also concerned that when economic times get difficult, diversity is the first thing that goes out the window.
Yeah.
And Michael and I were talking about creating a series with boxing clubs where we talk about opportunities and bring in people who are promoters, coaches, trainers, to try to keep the momentum going so that people who right now aren't able to ply their trade because either their gym shut down or there's no outlet for them to compete, so they stay engaged, so that they don't feel as though they don't get frustrated and fall out of love with their prospects.
Yeah. And it is all about economic opportunity too. So, creating some visibility for these athletes and opportunities for them as well.
Mm-hmm. I've got lots of questions, but I'll save them for later.
We'll come back and answer them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I'll be here next week. You can't get rid of me yet.
Yeah.
This is our Monday, Will, so this is the beginning of the week for most of us because Tasting Tuesday, 5:00 with Joe Louis Bourbon and the Man Cave Happy Hour. This is our Monday on Tasting Tuesday. So
off to a great start.
Yes.
Most important day of the week.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thanks again for hanging out in the Man Cave, and cheers.
Cheers,
Thank you.
fellas. Really
Cheers, guys. Nice to meet you, William.
Thank you. You too.
Pleasure.